Welcome everyone to my review of Transformers Sidearm Sideswipe. And originally I was not going to pick up Sidearm Sideswipe, but I realized that it was actually a completely different Transformer and not just simply a repaint. And really happy that I did end up picking it up. And if you compare the new one to the original, you can see that the Sidearm Sideswipe does have a new paint scheme. Particularly on the front end here with the red. Some people have argued that they don't really like that because it's not really movie accurate. I actually prefer it this way because if I have these two Transformers sitting on my shelf in alt mode, I want one to be different from the other, so as far as how it looks. So I actually prefer it that way. Apparently there is the Japanese version that has it all silver, but I actually prefer this paint scheme here. And you can see how I mentioned the fact that this is actually a different Transformer from the original. You can see that looking at the hood section, there is actually going to be a different transformation because here all you have is a gap down the middle for the transformation for the original Sideswipe, whereas with Sidearm Sideswipe you have these different gaps here that obviously is going to be a different transformation. Looking at the side, at the doors, you can see further evidence of that fact. You can see how the door here has a gap down the middle for the transformation into the blades, whereas Sidearm Sideswipe does not. And if you look at the bottom, there are some differences as well. Basically what happens with the new Sidearm Sideswipe is the arms actually are formed from the front of the vehicle and the legs are kind of formed from the back, which is kind of the opposite of what you have with the original. So being Sidearm Sideswipe, he does have some weapons that can be deployed in vehicle mode. Basically, they are the handguns that are used in robot mode but can actually be used for the vehicle mode. And let me show you how that works. So to basically deploy the weapons in the car mode or alt mode, you got to lift up this rear section of the car to get it to this point, and it can be kind of difficult when you first do it because the joints are rather stiff. But once you got it to this point, you can see where the weapons are just kind of pegged onto this post here. And what you're supposed to be able to do is to rotate these out so that they face the front of the vehicle, which is not always the easiest thing to do because they tend to fall off the post, but there's one out. And just rotate the other one in a similar fashion. Like that. And once you put the back panel back in place, you have these very nice weapons sticking out of the sides. Of course, these will become the sidearms for Sideswipe in his robot mode. But really nice looking weapons for vehicle mode, I have to say. And even though it's a gimmick, it's really nice actually. I like it. The weapons don't appear to be too large relative to the vehicle, so they're just about the right size. And it reminds me a lot of the vehicle that Matt Tracker drove in the Mask cartoon series. I think the vehicle was called Thunderhawk. But anyways, a very nice feature to have for the car mode or the alt mode. Alright, so let's go ahead and kick off the transformation into robot mode. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the doors and unpeg them from the sides and rotate them back like so. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front end here and split it. And these two sections here will become the arms and hands for robot mode. On the underside of the vehicle, I'm going to take the legs and pull the whole leg assembly down, like that. Now the transformation for the feet are actually relatively simple as compared to the original Sideswipe. All you got to do is separate these two pieces and you've got your foot assembly done. And do the same thing on the other foot obviously. And then what you want to take the leg here and you want to just push it up like that so you've got the signature legs for Sideswipe, and just do the same thing over here as well. Now, to attach the lower half to the top, you're just going to tab this into place, and it locks in pretty well, and you've got the lower half of Sideswipe completed. Now, for the rest of the transformation, it's kind of interesting from this point on. What you're going to do is you're going to take this whole section here and it's going to rotate, and it does rub a lot, so that's one bad thing about this. Even though it's a nice kind of unique transformation, it does kind of rub against everything, so it's kind of a potentially, you do it enough times it might be a bad deal. Anyways, you've got it to this point. I'm going to take the section here like this, take the little piece here and fold it in. And now that you've got the bottom half of Sideswipe taken care of, what you want to do is rotate these back here, the doors. This whole assembly comes down over the top, which is a really neat part of the transformation, and that's just going to kind of tab into the waist area there, like that. Then what you want to do is you want to take this section here. You can see there's like a little hinge there. Just fold it down so it sits kind of flush against the back, and then take the doors and rotate them up like that. They're on ball joints, so you got a wide range of posability for the doors, but basically they go like that according to the instructions. And as for the arms / hands, it's kind of a neat transformation. You want to take this piece here, kind of rotate it down and around, and the hand actually comes out, folds or swivels out like this, and then you just simply put this piece back in place, so you have one arm complete. And just do the same thing on the other side. And here is Sidearm Sideswipe in his robot mode, looking pretty good. Now let's do a 360 rotation around him. If you can't tell by now, the backpack is much less prominent on this particular Sideswipe than it is on the original. And of course you saw before that the transformation is quite different from the original Sideswipe's transformation, which is good. It's another reason to buy this figure, I would say. As far as posability for this figure, well, you've got rotation at the head, ball jointed shoulders, a bend at the shoulder. There really is no waist articulation. You've got leg movement. Of course, you still have those pistons or conduits or whatever you want to call them that are attached to the legs. But as far as this motion here, you can go pretty far forward, back a little bit, not quite so much to the side. The leg kind of rotates like that. You can see how it's kind of moves the pistons there, which is cool. But that's nothing really different than the older or the original Sideswipe. So you've got the leg assembly here. Not really much of anything to bend really, but you can see how if you move that back and forth, it kind of is a, I suppose you can argue that's a Mecha Live feature. Alright, so as I mentioned before, you do get two weapons for Sideswipe, both in his alt mode and for his robot mode. Here they are. And I guess all you got to do for the transformation to have him use them as pistols, pull this down like that, and you've got your weapon ready. Now, when I first got the figure and tried to place the handle into the hands, I wasn't able to get it to hold very securely. That is, until I realized that there actually is a molded groove, if you will, so that the hand does hold the grip quite well as long as you get it right into that correct groove. Just a matter of finding it. It's kind of hard to explain, but once you get in the groove, kind of like that, you can see it does quite, it holds quite nicely. Before it would just kind of fall out, but that's before I realized that, there's a certain way you got to put the handle into the hand, and once you find that sweet spot, you're pretty much able to keep both pistols in there securely. There we go. So yeah, it's really a nice deal that they included, two instead of just one. You can, since the arms are fairly articulate, you can, get the arms in kind of good poses for the, to use the, or to wield the sidearms, as you can see there. Besides the obvious differences in transformation and the weapons they use in robot modes, there are some key differences between the two figures. For me at least, I noticed that it took much longer to pose the older Sideswipe as opposed to the new Sidearm Sideswipe. And I don't know if that's due to the fact that there's a simpler or different transformation for the feet for Sidearm Sideswipe. I'm not sure, but I just know that it took definitely longer to pose the original, Sideswipe. So there is that issue. And if you go back to watch reviews on this guy, people did talk about how the feet, legs were kind of awkward to get the figure to stand, and you kind of had to find a sweet spot for it to actually stand on to pose it or stand it up straight even. So there is that key difference. One of the other differences I noticed is just in terms of the aesthetics of the legs. If you take a look at the old versus the new, I think the details in Sidearm Sideswipe here is much more detailed, and the plastic coloring looks good. A little bit better than the original, I think. So there are those key differences. You even have the key differences in the piston here connecting the upper leg to the lower part. So I like that look in the newer Sidearm Sideswipe figure. Okay, so I don't know if this is going to come across well on camera, but from what I've heard, the Sidearm Sideswipe figure is a actually smaller or slightly smaller figure, and when I measured it, particularly in alt mode, I didn't really find any significant difference. But if you take a look at the chest area here, compare the two, the chest area just looks larger on the original. If you take a look at the the metal that goes over the wheel arches, this section here, it just looks much bigger, much more elongated as compared to the newer Sidearm Sideswipe. I think that same size difference extends to the legs, particularly in the thigh area. Like if we take a look at the rear, it kind of shows up better, I think. If you take a look at the originals versus the Sidearms thighs, you can see they're much smaller, I think. And so that's kind of a key difference there. Another difference, it's more of a design difference, is I like the fact that in the new Sidearm Sideswipe figure, you've got the translucent red here that was part of the windshield for the alt mode. You can see how there's a difference in design element there. I do like the fact that they had the silver Autobot logo there, but it's definitely a nice design element to have that clear plastic on the top area of Sidearm Sideswipe. In person, the size of the head on the newer Sidearm Sideswipe is definitely a smaller head, so there's that difference as well. And if we take a look at the original sculpt, it's kind of bland. It's got some sculpting details, but there's not a whole lot of paint apps except for the eyes. It's kind of the same way here with Sidearm Sideswipe, but you do have actually, instead of like the dull plastic, dull gray plastic, you kind of have more of a shimmery silver, I guess, so there is that kind of difference there. So final verdict on Sidearm Sideswipe. 2 thumbs up. Even if you have the original Sideswipe, I do recommend you go out and pick up the Sidearm Sideswipe. It's going to make a great addition to your collection. And Sidearm Sideswipe, as you saw before, is a completely different transformation. It's not just simply a repaint. I do like the fact that you have some different paint apps that separate the new from the original. I realize some people don't like that, but I actually do. And the posability I found for the Sidearm Sideswipe figure is much easier than the original. And while I do miss the bladed weapons from the original, I actually do like the dual blasters. In fact, it reminds me of something I would see in a John Woo movie, so I like that fact. And yeah, definitely pick it up if you have the means to do so. I think it's one of the essential sideswipes in the Transformers universe, so definitely pick it up, definitely recommend it, and thanks for watching.